This is Kenya from Spiritual Vitamin C, the podcast. Truth alert. Living for God is the biggest win. Knowing how? Now that's the question. Story by story, we present and break down God's holy word and give practical tips on how to apply kingdom principles today. So stay tuned. Hey, this is Kenya from Spiritual Vitamin C, the podcast. I hope that your day is going exceptionally well. If for whatever reason it is not, prayers are up. My prayer is that God would bless you and encourage you and lift you up and help you to make it through on today. And so with that, today, I have Katee Capeto, LCSW. She's going to be with us today. As I mentioned in one of my other episodes, that this is the month of May. And this month we are running a series entitled Mind Your Mental Health, which is in honor of National Mental Health Awareness Month. And that was established in the year 1949 to raise awareness about mental health, encourage discussion, bring to bear the necessity of really protecting your mental health. I want to put this disclaimer out here that this is for informational purposes only. Please see your mental health professional, medical professional for any help that you may need. And so with that, Katee Capeto is a licensed clinical social worker, and she has been for the past 11 years. One of her greatest accomplishments is the ability to connect with people in crises. Some of her favorite work has been working with the Sheriff's Department of Sonoma County, where she was the mental health director. Her tenure there, she was able to revolutionize the department, bring about an understanding with regard to mental health, also the need for mental health treatment. By the end of her work there, she had developed family support group, bringing in things like weighted blankets to help those who were in crises. She's done a lot of other things. I'm going to bring her on the screen and we're going to just have this conversation with her. Mental health. What is it that she does? She's this champion, and we kind of want to get into the inner workings of her being a therapist and how she helps people in crisis in the field of mental health. So I'm going to bring Katee on, and she is going to give us some education, some information. She's going to also debunk myths that linger regarding mental health that cause people to not pursue professional help because all these negative stereotypes or stigmas surrounding mental health. So I'm going to have her come on the screen, and we're going to have a conversation. And so let us now welcome Katee, the therapist. Katee Capeto, how are you doing?
Thanks. I'm doing well, Kenya. Good to see you, for sure.
Good to see you as well. Yeah, you look great.
Thank you. Back at you.
Okay, so this is National Mental Health Month. 1949, it was established just for the purposes of what we're doing now, and that's education, debunking myths, bringing awareness, amazing mental health professionals. Let us know what you do. I know I said you're a licensed clinical social worker, but what is that? Tell me what you do.
Yeah, great question. So there's many things you can do as a licensed clinical social worker. I personally went into the field of mental health to specialize in clinical issues, clinical depression, things that need kind of intensive care, if you will. And so I've been licensed for about 11 years. I worked for a long time at the Sonoma County Jail, first as a clinician on the line, and then I got the opportunity to run the mental health program there, which was just a phenomenal experience and probably shaped me as a clinician, I would have to say as well. Currently, I'm working in emergency rooms all over Sonoma County, working with folks that are in crisis for various different reasons, whether it be drugs, alcohol, mental health, you name it. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Okay. people that deal with mental health struggle now, in particular, mental illness. It's very stigmatized, and to the point that when people, the last conversation I had was with an African American pastor who was also a therapist, and so we dealt with, like, within the Black community and then within the Black church, how there's a lot of things just culturally that we have to break through as African Americans to even consider mental health professionals, because so much has gone on within our community. So for you, just in the broader sense of that, America, uh, mental health, mental health, do you feel that there is a stigmatization with regard to mental health in the broader context of American culture?
I definitely do. And I think I see it probably most profound within like the adolescent, early adult age group. I think, first of all, it's so hard these days to grow up, if you will. It's different than when, I was growing up. And so I think that there's a lot more pressures and struggles. And then if you add COVID on top of that and the fires and all the things that we've experienced here in Sonoma County, even though people aren't talking about it, I think mental health, people in general, and mental illness has grown exponentially over the past couple of years. But I think that, trying to grow up and fit in the early adult or late adolescence, I think people are less likely to seek treatment during this period of time because they're so concerned about what their peers are going to think. In addition to that, I think that this age group is trying to launch. They're trying to become independent and not rely so much on, their parents. And so I think that a lot of folks put really high expectations on themselves and are less likely to seek out treatment because of what other people are going to think.
Well, you said something and I didn't really think about it, but, COVID and in Sonoma County fires and just adolescence, for them growing up, it's different. And it's different just because it's a different time, but it's also different because you're dealing with, like, COVID. For 2 years, they sat in front of this computer screen.
Yep.
And they had to communicate, and that social side that we all need each other.
Yep.
We saw this huge, everybody was impacted. And if we as adults are impacted, I can't imagine being like 10 years old trying to process COVID-19 and the fact that I can't see my friends. And so it's already hard enough. I can't see my friends. For you, COVID-19 as a therapist, did you see any change? I mean, in the way you had to practice, in the patients that you saw, did you see any real significant change?
I did. I mean, first of all, I think our population of folks that we help now is, gosh, it's so increased to the point where it's hard to meet, the demands, quite honestly. What I'm seeing too is that after being out of, structured school where we're learning these social development and that kind of stuff, these kids didn't get to go through those normal developmental processes. And so now that they're returning back to school, a lot of the kids are having a difficult time kind of knowing how to be, in their social interactions with folks. In addition to that, just anxiety and depression. I mean, honestly, the way that I look at mental health, I look at it on a continuum, being, 100% well to 100% not well. And honestly, we all fall somewhere on that spectrum. And I don't think it's normally on those outer edges. I think that life happens and it's going to happen no matter what. And so I think that these critical events that have happened over the past couple of years, we've seen folks that had kind of, low-level depression and anxiety that were still functioning okay, now having a difficult time with their day-to-day life because of these new, fears and traumas that we all experienced, individually, but also as a community.
As a therapist, is it hard to do your job over a computer screen?
Is it hard? Well, so actually I've been working in a couple different emergency rooms, and one we do in person, and then the other one took extreme precautions and had us do video visits. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's a case by case situation. And
Okay.
for folks that I felt really needed that face to face one on one, then I would provide that to them. But I think overall, it's more about
Okay.
the connection between, the individual and the therapist. And at the end of the day, I think that that's what really matters. It might be a little bit different for younger ones, I would say.
Okay.
Because again, they're still learning that social connectedness, if you will. And so I think for little ones that don't have that same development, I think it's a little bit harder for them.
Okay. You being the therapist, I think of you all as like heroes, and there's a skill set that you have. For you, where do you shine? Where do you feel, you know what I mean? Where do you feel your strength is? This is my bread and butter. This is why I was created. Where do you as therapist Katee shine?
That's a great question. I think, at the end of the day, we go to school for a lot of years and we learn all these different modalities in which we work. And all of that's great and wonderful to a degree. But I believe personally that the greatest gift that all of us as therapists or even individuals, I would say, is to get in touch with that true, authentic self, that being that you are, and being present. I think that I've developed this ability to be present in who I truly am, be present in the moment, and listen empathetically, and really kind of walk with the patient, if you will, through some of these difficult emotions, experiences, etc., without judgment. I think if I had to say one thing about myself, it would be that it's just, bringing who I am to the table instead of trying to focus on school book things that we learn. I think that's what I would say.
Okay, for those who are viewing on YouTube or listening on favorite podcasting platform, how can we be present with all the craziness going on? We're overbooked. We are underslept. we have slept less, but we're overbooked. We're wired for sound. We have our iPhones, we have our iPads, we have our iWatches, our smart watches, we have our everything wired for sound. So we're constantly connected.
Mm-hmm.
How do we enjoy the present? How do we get there if we're here? How do we get there?
Right. Good question. So again, when I think about mental health, I think of kind of self-care. And for me as a therapist, and I work a lot, I enjoy working a lot. It feeds me spiritually, emotionally, and I love connecting with people. And so I think the other side of that coin is that if you're going to, have to be that present that much, it takes a high level of self-care. And for me, that looks like prayer or meditation. It looks like, finding creative outlets, and making sure that every part of every day you're doing something good for yourself. And spending some time in quiet, whether that be in nature or just in, again, meditation, prayer. I feel like the downtime is equally as important because it allows you to give of yourself.
Okay. I know you have another job that you do on the side. Tell us about that. What
Well,
else do you do?
yes, and I'm trying not to make it a job, actually.
Okay, so a hobby, a love.
Yes, a hobby and a love. I have a few of those. So, as I mentioned before, I was running the mental health department of the jail, which really took up my 100% of my time, attention. And about a year and a half ago, I left that position, and I kind of got to this place where it's like, wow, what do I do now? I was spending so much time that I had to kind of relearn what was important to me. And I went down this journey of learning about essential oils and actually the benefits that they have towards our mental well-being. So I got certified as an aromatherapist, and then it just grew into these other things. And now I'm making soaps and body washes and candles and you name it, just about anything you can think of. And for me, it is an outlet. It is quieting the mind. It's using my hands and the smells, all the different aromas that go on. And it's something that I feel like is like I'm creating something that helps me feel good and helps others feel good. So, that's something that, a little bit newer for me, but having so much fun.
Okay. A therapist, Katee, I'm one of your patients. I come to you, I'm frazzled, a lot going on. What would be your treatment for me?
For me as a therapist, my most important gift that I can give somebody is to really listen.
Okay.
And you mentioned earlier about how we're in this kind of hustle and bustle and we're always on the move. And even in our friendships and, in our colleagues and whatnot, I think we listen to each other, but I'm wondering how much we actually hear each other, if you will. So what happens for me in a therapy session is just that. I really stop and I listen and I hear. And I think that sometimes just that being connected and supported during this period of time can really help nudge somebody off, of being in a crisis and onto a, wow, well, maybe I can get through this, I'm not alone. So I would listen to what you had to say and we would make recommendations together. I mean, to me, you're the expert of your experience and I'm just here to listen and kind of guide, if you will.
I like that. I'm the expert of my experience. You've talked about, you were the mental health director, right, at the county jail, and that you used weighted blankets to help those in crisis. Tell us something about weighted blankets within that environment. Why?
Yeah. So a weighted blanket is like a holding environment, if you will. I look at it almost as being like in the womb for, a fetus. And it's just this idea of completely being held. I think weighted blankets are good for folks that have a difficult time with language. Usually I would say that would be survivors of different kinds of trauma. Because when we have trauma in our history, oftentimes we disconnect from the emotions and the experiences that go along with life. And so we don't have the language to communicate what our needs are. And therefore, just being able to be held again, almost like we were when we were children, there's something just so therapeutic about that. So it's something that doesn't require language.
Now, did you introduce that to mental health in Sonoma County Jail?
I did actually. Working at the jail was really fun because, law enforcement really sees life kind of very black and white, controlled environment. And I remember when I first started my position there and I would say, hey, can we bring weighted blankets in here? And it was like, absolutely not. So then I would revisit again a month later. Hey, can I tell you the benefits of weighted blankets? And so this dialogue went on for several months. And finally they said, okay, they had me do a presentation of what the blankets were made of, what the risks and benefits were.
Really?
The costs. Oh, yeah. And finally they approved it. And we had a couple of frequent flyers that we knew well that came through the Sonoma County Jail. And it literally, like, whenever this person was dysregulated, we would be able to put this person in a wheelchair and cover this person with a weighted blanket, as opposed to having to do some of the restraints and other things that happen there. I personally think here in Sonoma County, we're very lucky. The Sheriff's Department really does respect mental health, and they're forward thinking. They allowed us to grow plants in there. We started a horticulture program. a family support group to bring families in so that they were more aware of what their loved one was going through when they were incarcerated. And
Wow.
I just can't tell you the number of connections that we were able to make. And it was just a really important piece of my career, and I'm just so grateful for it.
I had no idea that you were the force behind the weighted blankets. That is so phenomenal. Okay, so as you were talking and you were saying like all the amazing things that happened, all the changes, the great changes that happened in the jail because of you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, in the booking area, all of a sudden there was like a picture of, and I forget what it was, but it was like plastered onto all the walls. Was it like a picture of flowers or a picture of something that was in the booking area? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
Okay, I kind of wondered where that came from.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was in the, like when you would walk in the booking, not in the seating area,
Yeah.
but in the booking area, it was kind of like on the walls, and it was almost like a border.
Interesting. Oh, you mean above the doors? Is that what
Yeah.
you're referring to? I don't know
Mhm.
where that came from. I do know that when we were developing the competency program, we did get to meet with like various different like architects and people that really specialized in creating a therapeutic environment.
Mhm.
And so down in the jail-based competency program, we actually had like certain colors painted on the wall and murals and stuff like that. So I think for me, it was neat to see an organization, the sheriff's office, again, with this black and white thinking,
Mhm.
going, wow, maybe there is a better way, and maybe there's a way we can incorporate this and be safe.
Yes.
And it was just, it's really exciting. And I'm seeing that now so much more in our community. We have the inResponse team, and the SAFE team, and the mobile support team, which are all different teams of clinicians, licensed and unlicensed, that when someone's having a mental health crisis and they have to call 911, if it's for a mental health crisis, they're going to send a clinician out with the police.
Really?
And yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, we have a team in Petaluma, Santa Rosa, Healdsburg. One of the main ones here is the inResponse team, like I mentioned. And it's so neat to see kind of a shift in thinking. Police officers have a different kind of job description, if you will, and
Yes.
they don't understand the intricacies of mental health issues. That's not what their training is.
Right.
So, to allow for the mental health clinicians to come in and help folks during crisis, I just think is amazing.
I had no idea that all that was happening.
Yes,
Wow.
it's happening. As a matter of fact, if you know anybody in the Santa Rosa area that is having this kind of a struggle, the phone number is really easy. It's 575-HELP with the 707 area code. Super easy. Almost all the treatment plans that I now do when I have folks that are leaving the emergency room, this is protocol to just provide these crisis lines, so that people have a first line of defense when they're in crisis. There's a plan already that's thought of.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Since you're giving out resources, if now are you in private practice? Like if it, like any one of the viewers, listeners wanted to get in touch with therapist Capeto,
Yeah.
is that a
So
possibility?
yes. So I'm not currently in private practice. It
Okay.
is something I probably will be setting up pretty quickly. But one thing I do love to do and will always do is help connect people with resources.
Okay.
I think, having worked in Sonoma County for just so many years, there's just little things, and navigating the system too. Those are things that I've had to, learn professionally. And so if it's something that I can pass on to help someone else, I absolutely would love that. And you can provide my phone number, email address, etc., whatever people would be more comfortable with. Yes.
Okay. A couple more questions for you. Tell me some stigmas surrounding mental health, and then educate us as to why they're not true.
Yeah. So one of the things that I hear all the time is, I know you think I'm crazy, and it hits me in this weird way every time. I hear it almost every day, actually, at work, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I think that's what people still kind of, when you think of mental health, that's what they think of to a large degree is, wow, this person's out of their mind. And for me, a mental health crisis is no different than a medical crisis. If you have
Wow.
diabetes, you're going to go in and you're going to get treatment for that. You're probably going to take insulin, or if you have a heart attack, you're going to get treatment for that. But for some reason, we view mental health as this kind of taboo, when the truth of the matter is 3 to 5 out of 5 people, 3 of us are struggling with some form of a mental health crisis at some point in our life.
It's huge.
It is huge, and I actually would bet that it's higher than that after at least looking at the population here in Sonoma County with the fires and COVID, et cetera. I just think that that's compounded things that were already happening.
Up the way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's really hard for me to hear, because honestly, that not one time does that ever cross my mind when I'm meeting with anyone. It just isn't. I don't know. I almost wish that wasn't part of the vocabulary when we talked about mental health,
Yeah. How do you, so someone says that, what is your comeback?
I'll say something like, be nice to yourself. I said that never crossed my mind. And I do kind of try to normalize it and say, listen, if we had 5 people in this room, 3 of those 5 would have some form of a mental illness. We're just not all talking about it, which is kind of unfortunate, Yeah.
When you said the person says, you must think I'm crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and how we throw that around so carelessly.
Mm-hmm.
It's an everyday speech.
Yes, it is.
And when you have someone who is dealing with mental health and you throw that around,
Mm-hmm.
it has to affect them. I know that I was at a job and we were all watching TV with the residents, and I said something. Oh no, it was a person on the TV, and they were doing something, and I don't know if the other person said that they were crazy, but I laughed. I was laughing at something totally different. And like this is a true story. The person sitting right next to me said to me, "That's not funny," and was mad. And it
Wow.
was a whole conversation. And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" Like, "Oh, well, that's not funny because they were struggling with mental illness on the TV screen."
Mm-hmm.
But the person right next to me struggled with mental illness, very specific diagnosis. And this whole conversation ensued, and they were really offended. But I
Yeah.
had to let them know, like, me laughing had nothing to do with what was on the screen, but that let me know how sensitive
Yeah.
it was to them
Mm-hmm.
that they were watching this individual on the, on the movie deal with mental health. And then I'm laughing, and they automatically associated me laughing with
Right.
me laughing at this person with mental health, and because they struggled.
Right.
And we just had this long conversation, and I left that night thinking, wow, it opened my eyes to a world that I really hadn't thought about that. Like when we say
Sure.
certain words like, oh, that's crazy, or so-and-so's crazy, or, oh, when you like put your hand over your ear and you're like, you do that motion.
Right.
All of that, when you're dealing with people, either they're struggling with mental health or they know people or their family, their mom, their dad, their auntie, their
Mm-hmm.
uncle, someone struggles, and you kind of bring that in this everyday language that affects people.
Yeah. And I think one of the toughest things about mental health is that when you're going through a mental health crisis, it feels like you're the only one that's going through it, and you feel so alone, and there's so much shame that goes along with it. You know, our minds are, it's almost like they're playing tricks on us and giving us messages that we're not good enough, and that people don't like us the way we are. And it's tough because we tend to kind of curl up into our own shell. And so to seek out help when you're feeling as terribly as I just described, that is so brave to me, because again, it's kind of going against what our mind is telling us. I think mental health is such a lonely disease. And I think that is part of where the stigma comes from, because people do feel alone and they don't think other people are going through it. So they keep it to themselves because they feel so outcast and so different. But I'm praying that there will be continued growth in this area, because what I also know too is that there is treatment out there, and people do get better, and people live normal lives with severe mental illnesses every day. And getting back to the jail just for a moment, I think that was one of the greatest gifts that I got from the jail as well, is that I think that you can have a good life, even if you do have a mental health struggle. And I saw many people that were at their worst come in through the jail, maybe off medications, or maybe, got caught in some drugs, whatever the situation may be. But they were able to turn it around and get connected with services, medication, whatever it was, that missing link, and live normal and productive lives. So that really just taught me to be really grateful for mental health, because again, on the spectrum, we all fall somewhere on there.
We all do. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just going back to the percentage, 3 out of 5 people struggle with mental health.
Yep.
And truthfully, it's probably more like 5 out of 5. If we be honest, it's so stigmatized that, how do you really get a real answer, a real,
right,
percentage, because is everyone really that forthcoming?
Totally. Well, just looking at my, when I was at the jail, I would say about 40% of the jail population in general was being treated for some kind of mental health issue. In the emergency rooms, it's not uncommon to have up to 50% of the patients that are being treated in a medical emergency room be there for mental health issues, because there's just not enough beds. People spend a lot of time in the emergency room, and I'm so grateful that, we have dedicated mental health workers now that will at least provide support to these folks while they're waiting to try to get to a crisis bed. But at any given time, I would say 30 to 50% of the population in the emergency rooms are there for mental health reasons.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly busy.
Yes, but I like it like that. I almost feel like, for me, again, getting back to self-care, like for me, it means getting a good night's sleep the night before and going through my meditation prayer in the morning time. And when I walk in those doors, like I feel like I have my roller skates on and I'm just ready to go. I feel, like that's my calling. That's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I see that and I feel that all the time when I'm working with people that are in crisis. That's kind of more my speed, if you will, is getting to people when they're early in the crisis, just to try to diffuse it just a little bit and plant some seeds that tomorrow's going to be a better day,
Wow.
Yeah.
So you deal mainly with adults?
Actually, I did until a couple years ago. And now, I've seen kids as young as 4 years old now, all the way up, running the gamut. And, I just feel so blessed. I feel so lucky every time that I meet with a patient and they're comfortable enough to open up and let me know what's going on and give me that opportunity to, again, just provide a holding place for them, and listen,
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have, like, I know psychiatrists, they have like certain things that they like to do as far as like medication, whatever. Is there anything that you push one thing over the other? Like, do you prefer, like, if someone's having issues, like preferring medication, or do you prefer to push more natural things? And I don't even know if that's even the right word.
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
anything that you prefer when you're dealing with people?
What I've learned is that everybody is so individual,
Okay.
and that I try to listen again
Okay.
to what they're needing. But one thing I will tell you that I practice in every clinical interaction that I have with somebody, I call it heart waves.
Okay.
And heart waves for me is when someone is either so traumatized or just not able to find the words to express what they need to say, or maybe they're afraid to say it. There's this thing that I do, and it's almost like softening your gaze and looking at somebody directly in their eyes and being silent. And for me, I call that heart waves, because I'm sending heart waves to let the patient know that this is a safe space and this is your time, and no matter what you have to say to me, it's not going to surprise me, and I'm not going to judge you. I'm gonna try my best to be helpful to you, and that is something that I universally use across the board with every patient that I encounter.
Okay. Does it always work?
I think it always works, actually. I mean, I have to tell you, I've had people like screaming, calling me all kinds of names, and then I will just be quiet and send heart waves, and it just diffuses the situation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I would say it works in the sense that I know that we've had that genuine connection.
Okay.
Does it fix everything? No, but I do think it's almost like it opens a door to allow healing, and that's where we start, right?
Yeah. So that is that your initial, that's the first thing that you do? Like, walk me through a therapy session.
Yeah. So again, I walk in, I'll introduce myself, and
Okay.
I try to use humor quite a bit.
Okay.
I try to meet people where they're at, and
That's really important.
yeah, and I don't want to talk in clinical terms. I don't think that's helpful
Okay.
to anyone.
Okay.
Again, it's meeting the patient where they're at,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, so I will build rapport, kind of ask some generalized questions, and then jump into kind of, hey, how do we get here? Like, what's happening and how can I be of help to you? I also try not to make the therapy session, or oftentimes for me, these are like crisis interviews where we're making
Okay.
decisions about, are they going to go to the hospital? Or are they going to be able to go home? I try to be collaborative in my approach. I don't want it to ever seem like I'm the therapist and you're the patient, because again, you're the expert of your experience and I am the expert in the field of therapy. And so when we bring those together, we're able to come out with a good, treatment plan. And I never, again, want somebody to feel like I'm dictating treatment, because that doesn't
Okay.
work. People need to be invested in their treatment, and that's not to say that there's sometimes where people don't really know what they need, and in those cases, obviously, I will take the reins and do what needs to happen. But I want to always give somebody a chance to have a voice in their care.
So you're talking with a lot of experience. First starting out, were you like this?
No.
Were you very textbook?
Oh, very textbook.
Okay.
I swear that, the word suicide, for example, that is a word that I can say with respect, comfort, and ease today. But in the past, when I was first starting in this field, it was like, oh, suicide? Like, that word was scary. It had like emotional connotations around it for me in general. And now it's just a word, it's a word that describes something that is or isn't going on for somebody. And I just think, again, it's a word that I think about with a lot of respect. And,
Wow. That's good.
and again, it's a key word for me about getting back to that whole listening thing. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I think it's important to talk about suicide. Just being really honest with you. I mean, that is, obviously part of mental health. And, we've seen a lot of really important, celebrity figures, even recently, struggle with suicide. And I think the more that we can talk about it, the more we can kind of dispel some of the myths, because when you say you can't talk about something, it's almost like saying it's off limits. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And people aren't comfortable talking about it, when really it's part of our life experience for a lot of us. So
everybody's affected, and you have to have, I think, listening to people, just listening, not even just listening, is a really great place to start for anybody, anywhere, at any time.
Yes.
Being a listener, so that you know where to go from there, even if there's a plan that's in your head about, how you want to move forward. But let's just talk. Let's just meet in the middle. Let's have some commonality, so that just a guiding principle in life, to just be willing to listen to people. Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be heard.
Yes. And I actually think that listening is the greatest gift that you can give somebody, because again, with the pace in which we all approach life these days, and working 2 jobs or doing whatever we need to do just to make ends meet, oftentimes we hear people, but are we truly listening? You know what I'm saying?
Very important.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm very excited that you have decided to come on to this show on today. My goodness. Katee Capeto, LCSW, therapist extraordinary. I wanted to say once again, thank you, Katee, for coming on the show. Thank you all for spending time with me today as I interviewed Katee Capeto, LCSW, for this episode of Spiritual Vitamin C, the podcast. Would you please consider rating the podcast, reviewing, subscribing, and financially supporting? That would be so amazing. Thank you very much. And as I end, please remember that life needs a dose of Christ. See you later. If you enjoyed this episode of Spiritual Vitamin C, please subscribe. I would also love it if you would rate it and leave a review. I look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, life needs a dose of Christ.